The story of the Dark Elves in J.R.R. Tolkien's universe is shrouded in mystery and gaps that spark the imagination of readers. Unlike the high and noble elves, such as the Noldor or the woodland elves of the forests, the Dark Elves, known as the Avari the Reluctant, remain in the shadows of the great narratives. Little is said about them, but their absence from the main texts hides a fascinating story, full of untold secrets and possibilities. Who were these elves relegated to obscurity? What set them apart from their more famous kin? And what might have happened to them over the ages? To understand the Avari, we must go back to the beginning, to the time of the Great Journey, when the elves awakened on the shores of Cuiviénen, under the stars of a young world. It was there that the first elves beheld the light of Varda's stars, and heard the whispers of the wind in the mountains. When the Valar called the elves to leave Middle-earth and travel to the undying lands of Aman, many answered the call, but not all of them did. Among those who refused were the Avari, those who chose to remain in Middle-earth, far from the glory of Valinor. Their decision, seemingly simple, would shape a destiny completely different from that of the elves who followed the call. This choice, however, separated them from their kin forever. While the elves who departed for Valinor the Eldar were bathed in the light of the two trees and became wiser and more powerful, the Avari remained in the darkness of Middle-earth, living on the margins of greater events. For this, they were called Dark Elves, not because of the color of their skin, but due to their rejection of the light and blessings of Aman. But what happened to the Avari over the ages? Tolkien mentions little about them, and this is where the secrets begin to emerge. While the Eldar participated in great wars against Morgoth and later Sauron, the Avari lived quieter lives, yet no less marked by tragedies and challenges. Scattered across the vastness of Middle-earth, they became reclusive, residing in deep forests, distant mountains, and forgotten valleys. Some say the Avari developed their own languages, distinct from those spoken by the Eldar, and that their ways of life became so strange that even other elves regarded them as almost foreign. There are also hints that the Avari were in some way corrupted by the forces of evil. Morgoth, ever cunning in his plans, knew that the elves were a special race, full of potential for both good and evil. Thus, it is believed that he sought out the Avari, offering them power and knowledge in exchange for their loyalty. Some may have resisted, but others might have succumbed, becoming servants of darkness. It is possible that some of the Avari were the first to fall under Morgoth's influence, becoming the precursors of creatures like the orcs. Tolkien suggests, in vague passages, that orcs may have been corrupted from captured elves, and the Avari, living isolated and vulnerable, could have been the easiest targets. On the other hand, some believe that many Avari maintained their purity and became secret protectors of Middle-earth. Imagine dark elves inhabiting unexplored corners, guarding ancient secrets and protecting sacred places in the world. These elves might have become the guardians of forgotten forests, living in harmony with nature and avoiding contact with humans, dwarves, and even other elves. Their stories would be told only in whispers, as legends of mysterious beings seen under the light of the stars. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding the Avari is why Tolkien chose to leave them in the shadows. In his narratives, the focus is on the great deeds of the Noldor, Sindar, and Teleri, while the Avari are relegated to a secondary, almost invisible role. Yet this absence is, in itself, an opportunity to imagine what became of them. Could the Dark Elves have played fundamental roles that were never recorded by the Elvish chroniclers? Might they be the true guardians of Middle-earth, living far from the wars and conflicts that devastated the world? Another fascinating aspect of the Avari is how they might have influenced human cultures. Living in remote regions, these elves could have come into contact with the early men, sharing knowledge or perhaps being worshipped as supernatural beings. Perhaps some of humanity's legends about forest spirits or ancient gods are, in fact, echoes of encounters with the Avari. This interaction, if it occurred, would have been forgotten or distorted over time, leaving only fragments of memories and myths. The Avari also force us to reflect on a central question in Tolkien's world, the choice between light and darkness, between acceptance and rejection of the Valar's designs. By rejecting the call to Aman, the Avari chose a path of independence, but also of isolation. This choice distanced them not only from their kin, but also from the great blessings that shaped the Eldar. Were the Avari a warning about the dangers of rejecting the divine, or were they a symbol of freedom and self-determination? The answer, like many things in Tolkien's legendarium, remains open to interpretation. Finally, the story of the Dark Elves is a reminder of the vast and unexplored universe that Tolkien created. Although the Avari remain in the shadows, it is precisely this lack of detail that makes them so fascinating. They are the elves who chose the unknown, who turned away from the light to forge their own paths, and who, in their obscurity, guard secrets that may never be revealed. Who are the Dark Elves? The Dark Elves are not a separate race of elves, but rather a designation that arose from historical events related to the great journey of the elves to Valinor, known as the March of the Elder. When the elves awoke on the shores of Lake Cuiviénen, they were summoned by the Valar to leave Middle-earth and travel west to dwell in Valinor, the land of blessing. Those who accepted this call and completed the journey were known as the Calacendi Elves of the Light, because they beheld the light of the two trees of Valinor, Telperion and Laurelin. On the other hand, those who refused the journey, or stopped along the way, were called Morikendi Elves of Darkness, or Dark Elves. It is crucial to note that Dark Elves does not refer to morality or evil alignment. The term is purely symbolic, denoting the absence of the divine light of Valinor's trees in their lives. However, this name carries cultural and historical weight, as the Calacendi often regarded the Morikendi as inferior or less enlightened, creating a lasting division between these elven factions. The importance of the Dark Elves in Tolkien's legendarium, although Tolkien focused more attention on the Calacendi, such as the Noldor and the Vanyar, the Morikendi play a fundamental role in the history of Middle-earth. They represent the deepest connection of the elves to Middle-earth itself, as they never left it, and thus became the guardians of its forests, mountains, and rivers. Guardians of Middle-earth, the Morikendi never left Middle-earth, maintaining an intimate connection with its natural environment. This made them protectors of the wild lands and the primordial beauty of Middle-earth. The Sindar, a group of Morikendi led by Thingol, were particularly important in this role. They ruled the kingdom of Doriath and developed a rich and independent culture, symbolizing the potential of the Morikendi to flourish without the direct influence of the Valar. 2. EU. Local culture and wisdom. The Dark Elves developed their wisdom independently, without reliance on the enlightenment of Valinor. They were masters of music, poetry, and a connection to nature. The Sindarin language, one of the most beautiful and influential Elvish languages, has its roots in the Morikendi. Additionally, the interaction of the Morikendi with other races, such as the dwarves and men, shaped the fate of Middle-earth in ways the Calacendi, distant in the west, could not achieve. 3. Resistance to evil. The absence of Valinor's light does not mean the Morikendi were more susceptible to evil. On the contrary, their resistance to the domination of Morgoth and Sauron was remarkable. Thingol, the Sindar king of Doriath, was a fierce opponent of Morgoth, and his land served as a bastion against the forces of darkness for many centuries. Even after the fall of Doriath, the Morikendi continued to fight for survival and the preservation of their lands. Cultural rift and prejudice. The Dark Elves are also significant as a reflection of social complexity in Tolkien's world. The division between Calacendi and Morikendi illustrates the tendency of Elvish societies to create hierarchies based on spiritual or cultural experiences. This division is especially evident in the accounts of the Noldor, who often viewed the Morikendi as lesser. However, Tolkien also demonstrates that this view is limited and unjust, as the Morikendi proved to be as noble and courageous as any Calacendi. Why are they called Dark Elves? The term Morikendi originates from the Quenya Elvish language, literally meaning elves of the darkness, Mori darkness, Quendi elves. This name does not imply evil or corruption, but instead the absence of the light of Valinor's trees. This absence of light was seen as a lack by the Kalakendi, but in reality, it gave the Morikendi a unique perspective and a strength that the Kalakendi often underestimated. It is also important to note that the word dark in Tolkien's works generally symbolizes ignorance or separation, not evil. The Morikendi were, in a way, closer to the darkness of Middle-earth, but this also made them more resilient and adaptable to the challenges of that world. Memorable deeds of the Dark Elves despite their secondary role in many accounts. The Morikendi left a profound mark on Middle-earth's history. Some of their most significant achievements include the Kingdom of Doriath, under the leadership of Thinol and Melian. The Sindar branch of the Morikendi created one of the most powerful and culturally advanced realms of the First Age. Doriath was also the origin of crucial events, such as the tale of Beren and Luthien. The creation of the Sindarin language, which Tolkien describes as the primary Elvish tongue spoken in Middle-earth during the Third Age, has its roots in the Morikendi. Its beauty and complexity are a testament to the cultural richness of the Dark Elves. Resistance against Morgoth. The Morikendi played an essential role in the wars against Morgoth, fighting to protect their homes and people from the forces of darkness. Connection with other races, the Morikendi, especially the Sindar, formed crucial alliances with dwarves and men, shaping the course of Middle-earth's history. Final reflection. The Dark Elves, or Morikendi, are an essential part of Tolkien's legendarium, representing the richness and diversity of Elvish cultures. Their absence from Valinor does not make them inferior. On the contrary, the Morikendi embody resilience, adaptability, and a deep connection to Middle-earth. Exploring their stories reveals that light is not the only path to greatness. The story of the Dark Elves in J.R.R. Tolkien's universe is shrouded in mystery and gaps that spark the imagination of readers. Unlike the high and noble elves, such as the Noldor or the woodland elves of the forests, the Dark Elves, known as the Avari the Reluctant, remain in the shadows of the great narratives. Little is said about them, but their absence from the main texts hides a fascinating story, full of untold secrets and possibilities. Who were these elves relegated to obscurity? What set them apart from their more famous kin? And what might have happened to them over the ages? To understand the Avari, we must go back to the beginning, to the time of the Great Journey, when the elves awakened on the shores of Cuiviénen, under the stars of a young world. It was there that the first elves beheld the light of Varda's stars, and heard the whispers of the wind in the mountains. When the Valar called the elves to leave Middle-earth and travel to the undying lands of Aman, many answered the call, but not all of them did. Among those who refused were the Avari, those who chose to remain in Middle-earth, far from the glory of Valinor. Their decision, seemingly simple, would shape a destiny completely different from that of the elves who followed the call.